In the ruins of history, empires usually die loudly, collapsing beneath the thunder of cannons, the clash of armies, and the roar of revolutions, and we remember Rome as it burned, the Mongols storming across continents, and Berlin in flames with flags lowered and capitals captured, because history has trained us to believe that when superpower falls, the world hears the echo. But the British Empire did not fall like that. There was no final battle, no foreign army marched into London, and no enemy flag flew over Buckingham Palace, because the British Empire died quietly. It died in a climate-controlled office in Washington, D.C. It died not by gunfire, but by accounting. And the weapon that killed it was not a missile, a bomber, or a division of tanks. It was the U.S. dollar. And this is the story of how the largest empire humanity had ever built was not conquered, but foreclosed, with the moment of death arriving during the Suez Crisis of 1956, remembered by military historians as a failed invasion and diplomatic embarrassment, but recognized by financial historians as the instant the modern hierarchy of power was exposed, the moment the world learned a new rule that military power means nothing without monetary sovereignty, a lesson Britain was about to learn the hard way, because in the mid-1950s Britain still looked like a titan ruling continents, flying flags from the Caribbean to Southeast Asia, controlling sea lanes through the Royal Navy, and issuing a pound sterling trusted across Africa and Asia, while British schoolchildren stared at imperial maps soaked in pink and memorized a world that appeared to belong to them. Yet this vision was an illusion masking a devastated balance sheet left by World War II, when Britain defeated Hitler by selling its future, liquidating overseas assets, selling railways in South America, mines in Africa, and investments accumulated over generations, and when there was nothing left to sell it borrowed until by 1945. Britain became the largest debtor nation on earth, an empire that still existed on paper but was financially hollow, held together by the fragile sterling area where imperial nations stored reserves in London, granting liquidity while planting a time bomb beneath the economy, because if confidence in the pound failed, those nations would rush to dollars and Britain's reserves would vanish overnight, a weakness British leaders understood as they went to sleep worrying about gold, dollar balances, and capital flight, knowing Britain had to look strong because weakness would be fatal, and the most vulnerable artery of this empire was the Suez Canal carved through Egypt, not merely a shortcut, but Britain's economic jugular vein carrying 2/3 of its oil, without which factories stalled, homes went dark, and the economy crawled. A canal that ran through Egypt but was controlled by a European company dominated by British and French interests whose profits flowed north, while Egypt received crumbs. And for Prime Minister Anthony Eden, a man shaped by the trauma of appeasement in 1930s, the canal was untouchable. So when Gamal Abdel Nasser rose to power demanding independence, dignity, and control over Egypt's assets, dreaming of the Aswan High Dam to modernize his country, Eden saw not a reformer, but threat, especially after Nasser angered Washington by flirting with Moscow and asserting Cold War neutrality, prompting the United States to withdraw dam funding in July 1956, followed by Britain, leading Nasser to shatter the world order on July 26, 1956, when during a broadcast speech, he uttered a code word and Egyptian forces seized and nationalized the Suez Canal, igniting hysteria in London as Eden believed Britain was being strangled, that Egyptian control of Suez meant control of British oil, blackmail, collapsing prestige, and a run on the pound, convincing him Nasser had to be removed. Yet this was no longer the age of gunboat diplomacy because the United Nations, global media, and most importantly a U.S.-dominated financial system now existed, with President Dwight D. Eisenhower opposing military action and warning Eden not to invade, warnings Eden ignored as Britain, France, and Israel hatched a secret plan to disguise aggression as peacekeeping, a plan that worked militarily but amounted to economic suicide, because as bombers struck Egypt and troops advanced, another invisible war began on currency markets, where traders saw Britain launching an unauthorized war against America's wishes. Confidence vanished, sterling was dumped, and under the fixed exchange rate system, the Bank of England burned gold and dollars to defend the pound as reserves drained by millions each day, triggering panic inside the Treasury, where Chancellor Harold Macmillan realized Britain was fighting a war it could not afford, only to discover that appeals to the IMF meant nothing because Washington held the key with the United States, blocking loans, and Eisenhower escalating by signaling he could sell British debt and end Britain instantly. And on November 6, 1956, while British troops were winning on the ground, the cabinet confronted reality that Britain was bankrupt, with gold reserves lasting days, not weeks, unable to import food or fuel without dollars, forced to choose between holding the canal or saving the pound. A choice that broke Eden as Britain ordered a ceasefire, halting troops miles from victory. Stunning. Soldiers who had not lost yet saw the war end, marking Britain's defeat by the dollar. Followed by total humiliation as Eisenhower demanded unconditional withdrawal. Egypt blocked the canal. America refused oil. Petrol rationing returned. Factories slowed. Homes grew cold, and the illusion shattered, with IMF funds released only after compliance, proving Britain was no longer a superpower. Leading to Eden's disgraceful resignation, the erosion of sterling's authority, the quiet withdrawal of reserves by sterling-area nations, the unraveling of empire, accelerated independence movements, colonies becoming liabilities, and Britain turning to Europe for survival, as the Suez Crisis marked the true end of the British Empire not militarily, but financially, teaching the world a new law of history that power no longer flowed from battleships, but from currencies, reserves, and access to capital, proving the United States no longer needed armies to defeat rivals because banks were enough. A lesson defining the modern world through sanctions, asset freezes, and currency crises that all trace back to 1956, the year an empire learned the sword bows to the ledger, because the British Empire did not fall in fire. It collapsed when its balance reached zero. And if you want more untold stories like this, the hidden wars behind empires, currencies, and power, then hit like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because history isn't just written by winners, it's balanced on a ledger.